Welcome to Chat with a Chaplain. My name is Paul Arnold. I serve here at Glacier Hills, and my guest today is Rick Spalding, who's the interim senior pastor over at First Presbyterian Church of Ann Arbor, which is really familiar to our people here at Glacier Hills. Rick, I don't know if you realize that we have not only around 40 to 50 of your members, but we have a lot of fans of your broadcasts each week, and they really enjoy the music, they enjoy the proclamation. And you came at a very interesting time for all of us. I thought you were coming at a great time. You could enjoy Ann Arbor and all the fun things that come with this place. But you came from Massachusetts to wonderful Ann Arbor during the pandemic.
Wonderful Ann Arbor, truly wonderful Ann Arbor. I actually beat the pandemic by a few months. I started almost exactly a year ago, right at the beginning of October of 2019. So I had a few golden months of fall, and then a lovely Christmas, and a few gray months of winter.
Yes.
And then the pandemic happened, and you're right. After that, it was not what any of us were expecting.
Yes, and you came from a place I'm fairly familiar with, Massachusetts. My mother grew up in the Salem area, and my grandfather was a American Baptist pastor for 50 years in the area. So we would go out to Massachusetts, and then we'd go to the Cape and enjoy that quite a bit. But you live in Ipswich, which is near Gloucester, right?
Yeah, just a little above Gloucester, very close to Salem.
Yeah.
When I closed on the little house that is home to me now, I had to go to the Salem Registry of Deeds. So I know Salem well. It's the county seat of my county, and the American Baptist heritage in your family is distinguished. Of course, Roger Williams, the founder of the Baptist Church in the United States, anyway, what was then the colonies, came from the North Shore, as we call it, the North Shore, as we call it up there.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a beautiful part of it's right on the coast of Massachusetts, about an hour north of Boston, about halfway from Boston to the New Hampshire state line, if you can picture that on a map.
But I don't hear much of Massachusetts accents from you. I think, did you grow up in New York, or where did you grow up?
Oh gosh, I grew up in a bunch of places. So I think well, I'm sure I have an accent to some ears, but it isn't identifiable to me regionally anyway. I spent a goodly chunk of my childhood actually on Lake Michigan, but on the other side of it, over in Illinois. So I even have some Midwestern roots that I'm very proud of. But you're right, the Massachusetts accent, not only hasn't it really sunk in, but I can't really even do a very good imitation of it.
My grandpa used to say, "The pot, the cod, and dog and pock," because he used to like to go to the Boston Red Sox games. And back when he was a pastor, there was clergy went in free with a little pass.
Yeah.
He kept this little pass the size of a ticket in his wallet. So whenever he could slip away, he'd go by himself and enjoy just downtime watching the Red Sox. And I used to argue over the phone about Detroit Tigers, who was better, Al Kaline or Carl Yastrzemski. So we had that connection back then. But I was looking through your bio on the website for First Pres, and you're a man of many degrees, and you're trying to be humble there, but Yale Divinity, Union Theological, and Hartford. And my question is, which degree was the hardest and which degree was the most enjoyable?
Oh gosh, what a great question. I think that the hardest was the last one, the Doctor of Ministry degree, for the particular reason that it involved writing a big paper, like sort of like a dissertation. I hasten to say, a Doctor of Ministry degree is not like a PhD. It's not nearly quite so academic a degree, because what you study is all enmeshed in the work that you're doing. So it's not pure research or anything like that. But it was hardest for me because it's very intimidating to, at least it was for me, to write a paper of that scope. So that was hard. And one of the best parts of it was when my advisor said, the single best word that you can apply to your dissertation is the word done. And she was right. It was a sweet day when I finally turned it in. So that was the hardest. And the most rewarding was my Master of Divinity degree at Yale Divinity School. I loved Yale Divinity School. I've stayed very, very actively involved as an alumnus. It's just a wonderful school, and it was a very vibrant and alive place in the late 70s, early 80s when I was a student there, and I just will be thankful for every day of my life for the time that I spent there.
I found seminary to be very intellectually and spiritually challenging, and those little sidebars where you would go off with 3 or 4 of you after the class and talk about what you just learned, and some people would really challenge you for a good reason, and it was very exciting time in our life. And I also got my Doctor of Ministry, and I also agreed the best word was done when I got my dissertation done, or my major paper. I wrote mine on prayer in the church, teaching prayer to people of all ages at different levels of development with patients, or different ways of looking at it. So what was your major paper on?
Well, at the time, I was in the midst of a fairly long period of my life serving as a college chaplain at a small liberal arts college in Western Massachusetts, Williams College. I know that one of your resident neighbors there, who's probably watching this, is Martha Craybill, who is a very, very, very loyal Williams College spouse. She and I have savored that relationship many times. I was a college chaplain, and the whole point of the Doctor of Ministry paper is to write about your work, to dig that much more deeply into your work, to do some research about it for sure, and then to describe some learnings about it. At the time, I was one of the big pieces of my job was to lead a course during our January term, sort of an immersion course where I would take about a dozen students to live in Nicaragua in Central America for a month. And that became a very important piece of my work, and something that I was really engaged in. And so I wrote about the things that I learned about how to be a college chaplain from the students who went on that trip. There ended up being, over the course of a number of years, about 75 or 80 students altogether who went on that trip. So I was able to survey them with a bunch of questions, and their responses to those questions helped me to learn what they had learned by doing that trip, and in turn what that taught me about how to be a college chaplain.
What a growing experience to go away and to see a different part of the world. And I remember I went to Tanzania with a friend when I was pastoring church in Arbor, and we were gone for 10 days. And I tell people I never understood what it meant to be a minority until I went over there. I didn't understand about poverty until I went over there. I think most people have this common feeling like, wow, I should never take for granted some of the things that I enjoy on a day-to-day basis. When you were a chaplain for 18 years, I looked up. What was the secret of a long ministry there? Because not everybody is able to stay in one place for 18 years.
Well, I don't know what the secret was, but I know what kept me there 18 years, and that was, oh my gosh, the incredibly moving and powerful experience of accompanying these emerging young adults as they cross the threshold from adolescence to young adulthood. It's such a vibrant time in life spiritually, Even the students I met who were the most adamant that they were not religious at all, had no interest in religion, were very alive spiritually, by which I mean asking big questions that don't have easy answers, the kinds of big questions that don't show up on the syllabi of even the best college courses mostly, questions about the meaning of life, the purpose of life, what they value, what I always loved the question, what are you a part of that's bigger than you and more important than you? That question leads pretty quickly to spirituality, even if it doesn't lead necessarily to any one particular religious tradition. And my job was not only to work with Protestant Christian students, but to work with all students. I had a team of, there were 4 of us all together. I had a Jewish colleague, a Catholic colleague, and a Muslim colleague. But we all understood all of our work to be in relationship to all of the students. So if a student came into our office wanting to talk to a Catholic priest, we could make that happen. But if a student came into our office, as many of them did, just wanting to talk to someone who would be empathetic and present and compassionate to them, they could sit down and talk to any one of us, and our receptionist would connect them with whoever happened to have time. So it was important to be able to be that kind of flexible about the boundaries of religious traditions.
One of the things that I was taught in CPE training, which is clinical pastoral education, is something that my dad taught me from an early age, is to respect people and honor their faith tradition. And when I have volunteers come here, whether students in seminary or college students, and they want to spend time, I give them orientation about what inspires people, not to pigeonhole people by labels or major religions, but because when you're dealing with somebody in a crisis in a medical situation, they're in a crisis, and what they're looking for is inspiration, courage to keep on going. They need something to live for or to focus on. What inspires them? And that, talk about that sense of spirit. And then when the relationship develops some, then they're able to build that trust and talk about other ways they get support. But it's a definite mind shift, and it starts with the person that comes to you, and that's what you said. When those students came to you, you started with them and where they were at and what they needed to do. I love the story of Jesus walking on the road to Emmaus with the other pilgrims there, and he didn't just say, here's everything that's just happened. He says, tell me about your perspective of what's happened. And I say, we're here to walk alongside people in their spiritual journey, not to say, this is what you should do. But it takes a little mindset difference. So my next question is, you are in an interim position. What skills have you taken from being a college chaplain and lean on in your role as an interim?
Well, the thing about young adulthood is that it's a very high energy time, and I don't think most of us realize at the time we're in college how brief and fleeting those years actually are, and students are in a very big hurry to grow up and be considered adults and be off and about their lives, which is great. But some big part of my work with them was to encourage them to be patient and to pay attention to the moments of their lives as they go by, not to miss precious things, not to travel so quickly over the ground they want to cover that they miss experiencing the ground and the moments for what they are. So to be patient and to pay attention. I felt as though it was some part of my the opportunity that my job presented in their lives was to tell them to take time to really savor the magnificent gift of life, not to let the days go by in a blur. And in some ways that are different, but some ways that are similar too, I've found that the message of patience and attentiveness is a really big part of my work here. Not least to myself. I mean, I'm very honored and pleased to be here, and the church wants to get on into the next chapter of its life, and I want to help the church get to that point too, so that I can go back home to Massachusetts and resume retirement.
Yeah.
But we want to not be covering the ground of this transitional time too fast. We don't want to cover it so fast that we don't notice it, don't have a chance to savor the particular opportunities of this time. A transitional time in the life of a church is a really, really valuable opportunity to take a step back and look at things, to take a few deep breaths, to think sort of reflectively about the whole scope of the church's work and where it's going next. Taking a pause to reflect is really what I think this time is about. But it's a little counterintuitive because, as I said, there's a lot of energy in the church, and we're just coming up on 2 years of time since the last pastor left. So, to lots of people, for reasons we can understand, it feels like, a long time. Can't we get on with it?
Yeah, right.
The answer is yes, we can get on with it. We are getting on with it. But let's take one step at a time and really notice what there is to notice about where this church is and where this church wants to go next. So that quality of patient attentiveness, it does have some through lines back into my time as a chaplain.
Oh, I think it's well said. I grew up in a Presbyterian church in Midland, Michigan. And it was a very vibrant church, very well attended. And when I left to go to college, I got involved with some Bible studies and worked Salvation Army, and led me down a couple different paths. But they went through a lot of transitions and waiting for the right person. And when I was a pastor, senior pastor, unfortunately, I remember feeling the rush, and we hired a staff person too soon, and the grief later that we felt because we knew down deep that we should have waited longer. But the siren call to looks like a good person, let's just go, is hard to resist sometimes when you have a pressing need. So patience is a word we all know but don't like to hear. And when I moved to Ann Arbor, I realized there's a lot of go-getters here, a lot of self-starters, people who do well at work and everything. And so right now, during COVID, I'm sure patience is something everybody's had to learn, and restrictions and not doing things. How is it for you to lead a service without the congregation and the pews? I know I watch the services, I share them here. I miss leading services here at Glacier Hills where we can't do that yet. So how does it feel to be in that large space without everybody gathered?
Thanks for asking that, Paul. It's a poignant question. It's really hard. I really didn't see this coming. This is one of the things about COVID that has caught me the most by surprise, and it's a really interesting thing to have discovered. But it's a poignant thing. I really enjoy preaching. I really enjoy the writing that goes into it, the reading and especially the writing. But I don't think I had realized until COVID hit how absolutely essential to the fulfillment of that experience, that sense of it being an experience that's being participated in by more people than just me, how important that is. The room isn't quite empty when we tape our services because there's a few musicians who are here. But the difference between, a couple of people and a room full of people who you're going to see then on the way out and have a chance to be in something much more like a reciprocal conversation, even if it's very fleeting while shaking hands or something. it's a huge difference, and it really, I don't know how to describe it. If you, whether you're a singer or not, if you like to sing, or you can imagine somebody who likes to sing, the difference that it makes to sing in a space where you can kind of hear the sound bouncing around, versus singing in the kind of space that is, imagine a space that has shag carpet on all of the surfaces, where the sound just kind of immediately gets swallowed up and muffled.
Yeah.
That's what it's like. It's almost like there's no sound. There's no reverb, no human reverb. So it's very, very hard. And I know people are out there. I mean, you get emails and stuff like that, but it's just so different than seeing faces. There's nothing to even peg your vision to while you're talking. I do imagine a few people out there, but it's an active imagination on my part. So I miss everybody so very much.
When I transitioned from being a pastor in the area to being a chaplain at St. Joe's, people asked me if I missed preaching and if I missed things. I said I didn't miss the deacon meetings, but I I missed that interaction, like you said, the community. And my wife and I actively were grieving. It was our choice to go, but we were actually grieving the sense of we didn't see that group of 200-300 people on a regular basis that were our support, and we invested in their kids and things like that. Because for me, I didn't feel it was wise to stay in the same church when I was going to be a chaplain, because I needed to leave room for the next pastor to come along and to lead without people coming to me as an authority figure. So that was a hard transition. But I tell you, when you're able to talk and people smile or react or whatever, when I was a pastor in Baltimore, we had a pulpit exchange, and I was out in the suburbs near where Cal Ripken, the baseball player, lived, and I exchanged with a downtown African-American church. And I did it for one Sunday, but I wanted to stay down there. The response and the respect and the joy I had preaching with that church was such an honor to me. So the response, I think, does make a difference.
Yeah.
So I noticed on your bio that you're a writer too, but I think you must be a cook, because 2 of your books are Feasting on the Word and Feasting on the Gospels. So if you had one favorite meal you could have tonight and just put in your order, what would be your favorite meal?
Oh gosh, what a good question. I love to cook. I'm not great at it, but I really enjoy experimenting and using recipes and stuff like that. What would be the meal? Well, right now I'm a little nostalgic for my beloved Massachusetts, and there are a couple of restaurants in my little coastal town of Ipswich where the special of the the restaurant specialty is it's not a very fancy dish, but it's just baked haddock, a generic white fish from the East Coast. Usually has some crumbs on it and a little bit of lemon juice. Very, very simple, but I'm feeling very, and it always comes with a baked, as the waitress in the Choate Bridge pub says, baked burrito. With baked burrito and green beans. And, so I'm missing that particularly. But I also, one of the places I've traveled that I've enjoyed the most is France, and almost any meal I've ever had in Paris makes me deliriously happy. So any French cooking of any kind would win my heart too.
Do you have a favorite chef on TV or writing that writes books?
Well, this isn't quite chef or author, singular author, but there's a really nice magazine called Cook's Country that I get, which I really like because it has lots of different kinds of recipes in it. Some are fancier and some are simpler, and they all come with lots of explanation, and I enjoy reading about that. When you mention cooking and TV, I have to admit to a guilty pleasure here.
Okay.
Uh, and I haven't found it in Michigan. It's probably here somewhere on public television, but back home in Massachusetts, I love to watch the Great British Baking Show.
Oh yeah.
And which is a kind of a contest, a baking contest, and it's totally frivolous. I'm not sure you really learn that much about how to bake well from watching it, but no matter, I devour, as it were, I devour those episodes.
So my daughter went to Hope College, and she came home, I think, after her sophomore year and said, "Oh, let's watch the Great British Bake Off." And we said, sure, we want to do something with her. And we got hooked, and we watched the episodes. And you can watch most of the years on Netflix. And now we argue if it's as good as it used to be with the different hosts and things like that.
Yeah.
But it's what I call mild drama. It's very safe drama, because it's about whose souffle is going to make it, or whose cake is going to rise, and nothing's too extreme. And one time my wife talked me into making an apple rum cake, one of the recipes from it. When I made it, I really did well until the frosting, and I thought the frosting ingredients were supposed to be heated up. Instead, they were supposed to be cool. So when I heated it up, it became like a drizzle, and I put it on the cake anyways, and I thought it was okay, and then I made it the right way, and my wife liked the first way better.
Yeah, the first way sounds really good.
So I came up with a cold butter frosting. I heated it up with vanilla in there, a little lemon zest, and it was really, I don't want to know how many calories that was. That was way too much.
Yeah.
So with your life here in Ann Arbor, what are you finding restorative to you? Because I know we as ministers need to recover and restore our strengths we're able to give out. Contrary to some people's belief, we're not 100% extroverts. We need to restore and recharge. How do you recharge?
Well, I have to admit that it's been really hard, because one of the true things about our life now is how limited our in-person contact with people can be. So when I do get to actually sit with a real person and have a conversation, of course, with social distance, that's just enormously heartwarming for me. One member of the congregation invited me over for dinner. We sat on opposite sides of his porch, long distance away from each other, outdoors. But just to sit with a real person and have a back and forth conversation was, it's a good example of something that I hadn't paid enough attention to the value of before this time, when suddenly we notice blessings like that so much more acutely. I've also been spending an inordinate amount of time on the phone and with FaceTime and stuff with friends back in Massachusetts and other places too. I have found that in this time of kind of enforced separation from many forms of social interaction, it's the more important for me to stay in touch with my friends, even remotely, just to pick up the thread of continuing conversations of friendship. So I think when I put down the phone after one of those conversations is one of the times that I'm aware of having been nourished and replenished a little bit in this time of privation.
One of the things I've observed by watching the services, and I observed when you came here for one service, I think it was a Christmas service a year ago.
Yeah.
Was that you really, I think maybe I'm reading too much, it looks like you really enjoy mentoring the younger members of your staff, especially when you do the children's message up front. Maybe that's a carryover of your college ministry with the college, but it seems like that your pastor of skills just are really evident then.
Well, thank you. It's humbling and wonderful to spend time with people who are younger than you are. I more often feel that they're mentoring me rather than the other way around. I just feel that there's so much to learn now from those who are in generations younger than mine, and I particularly think that their passion about putting the world right, fixing many broken things, and changing some of the things that have driven the world into a terrible corner environmentally and economically and in some other ways. I learn a lot from being around people who are younger than me, and as far as children go, it's just so humbling to think that they'll be in charge of caring for the world when I'm no longer here to be involved in that. So it makes you want to take very, very, very good care of them so that they can, and make sure that they get, all the education that they possibly can and have all the resources that they possibly can and be ready for the huge challenges that lie ahead in the future.
I love the idea of the legacy of investing in the future generations. Because brick and mortar will go, but the way you can influence someone to be a better person, a follower of Christ, a thoughtful person, a kind person, is what I want to do, to invest in the next generation. And I do feel privileged working at Glacier Hills to hear so many great stories and to learn from the wisdom that's all around me. And I identified early on that my father passed away in 2005 suddenly. So there's sometimes I have to watch it because I want to get so attached to some guys that remind me of my dad. But I watch it to keep my boundaries there clear, but to still care for so many people here. And you were kind enough to encourage me. It has been a challenging time with over 400 residents, and most of the time with just me, without volunteers and seminary students. And each day I come to work and I pray about how to spend my time and who needs my time. And as a pastor, you know this, there's no way you can get to everyone. There's always a time where you just have to make a choice. So it's a challenge. It's a privilege to be called into ministry. I enjoy it so much, and I think you do as well. Before we wrap up, I want to ask a fun question. And somebody might refer to the movie called A Bucket List, but I don't want to feel that old. I'm not going to call this my bucket list. But if you could name 2 places you would like to travel to in the next 10 years, where would they be?
Gosh, great question. Who have been some places that I have really loved and yearn to go back to, but I'm not gonna choose them because I think it's good to think about going to new places. I've spent just a very small amount of time in Italy, and I would love to go back to Italy and spend a good deal more time there. Pretty much anywhere. I mean, I don't have a specific itinerary in mind, but it's just a country that intrigued me, culture or set of cultures that I found very beautiful and challenging in some ways. So that's one place. And I've always wanted to go to South Africa to see with my own eyes the places where such important issues were engaged within my lifetime, and a country that really transformed itself. under a truly great leader, and then has had a lot of trouble hanging on to the gains that they made during that time. So, and I've also heard that it's a very beautiful place.
Mm.
So I think Italy and South Africa are two places that I think of wanting to go.
For me, I really want to get to Alaska. Um,
Ah,
I'm a fisherman. I love outdoors. I love camping and hiking. So I definitely want to get to Alaska and see that for myself. I think the scale of everything is what I'm looking forward to seeing. And Australia is on the other, New Zealand and Australia, one of those two. I would like to get there too, and um, just beautiful. And that's some of the people living here at Glacier talk about the wonderful trips, and looking forward to that in the future.
yeah. Oh, I hope that can happen, Paul.
Yeah. Rick, thank you so much for spending time with me. Thank you for your ministry at First Pres. We really appreciate all the support you give us and the residents here. I know you come supporting your members who live here, but there's a lot of other people who get benefit as well. And for your staff, who's so generous, we really appreciate it.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you for what you do. Thank you for the care you take of so many people there, and thank you for building such a lovely, faithful, caring community.